Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Insomnia Fix podcast. I am just getting back from Las Vegas, where I went for spring break with my family, and it was a much needed rest. And now I am back to work and so excited. And so I'm saying this because I do want to point out that it's good to take breaks from work and have time to decompress. This is why I don't typically work weekends, I don't work evenings. And then when it is my work time, I'm actually really excited and motivated, and therefore I'm more productive and have the energy I need to work. All right, today I want to talk about drinking water. And I know that this might seem weird or not relevant to sleep, but it's actually totally relevant to sleep. And I want to tell you about my client, Todd. He came to me because he was waking up multiple times a night and, was feeling tired all the time. And I run the hair tissue mineral analysis, or the HTMA, for all of my clients. And this test shows mineral balance, which I've talked about before on the podcast, which is super critical for sleep. It also shows heavy metals. And what I found in his test results is that his copper was super high and his uranium was super high. And both of these metals can totally cause sleep. And copper toxicity is something I've also talked about in a previous episode. I have an entire episode about it. Copper isn't technically a heavy metal, it's a necessary mineral, but it can build up and become toxic in the body if there's too much of it. And so for Todd, one of his main source of copper was drinking water from copper pipes. Now, he has two homes, one in Las Vegas, where he has a really high quality filter and drinks great water there. But he also has a home in Jackson Hole, which is where I live. And it's an older home and it had copper pipes. And because he didn't live there all the time, he didn't see the importance of filtering that water. But once we saw on the test results that he was, being exposed to that, then that was motivating to him to add a filter. So, copper toxicity is a big thing that I see in quite a few of my clients. It's more common in women because birth control can lead to copper toxicity, but occasionally I see it in men too. And a lot of times then it is from drinking water. Now, uranium is a heavy metal that is toxic, and it is commonly found in the mountain states. So there's uranium in the soil, especially in the Rocky Mountains. And so that can get into our tap water and well water, especially. A lot of people think that their well water is great because they aren't getting all the contaminants that are in tap water, which is true. But any heavy metals that are built up in the soil are going to be in the well water as well. So these are going to be super important for sleep. Now, Todd also had other issues. He had a parasite, he had poor digestion, he had gluten sensitivity. So his gut also wasn't healthy. But the heavy metals were a really big part of this for him, as well as gut health. So that's definitely something that we addressed. And after working together, he went from waking up 3 times a night to never waking up more than or 3 times a night, usually 1 time a night, most nights. He was feeling a lot more well rested. He had less pain in his hip and he had lost 8 pounds. So, finding these underlying health issues that are affecting sleep are super important. So that's why I wanted to have this episode all about copper. So first, I want to talk about tap water because there are so many contaminants in tap water, including chlorine, which actually kills the good bacteria in our guts. So all the things that the tap water is treated with can be toxic. And then, they filter some of the worst heavy metals out possibly, or they do it to some extent, but heavy metals can still end up in tap water as well. And then I already mentioned well water. The problem with that is that the heavy metals in the soil are going to get into the water. So if you're drinking tap or well water most of the time, it's not good for you. And if you aren't sleeping well, this is one of the pieces of the puzzle that is affecting your sleep. So, what you can do, first of all, you can get your water tested. So, there is a company called My Tap Score. You can go to mytapscore.com and you can send in your water samples. They do tap water, they do well water. Sometimes you can even send in your filtered water to see to make sure that it's filtering everything out. So that's what I recommend for some of my clients who want to know what's actually in their tap water. Another great resource is the Environmental Working Group, or EWG. So you may have heard of them because they come up with the Dirty Dozen list showing the produce items that have the most pesticides. They come up with that list every year. They have a ton of other resources, including a tap water score. So you can actually enter in your zip code and then it will show you what the common contaminants are in water. So I'll do this for my clients. I've seen arsenic show up. And when I tap in the zip code, for example, my client David, who lives in Maine, turns out arsenic is one of the big contaminants there. So if you don't want to pay to get your tap water tested, this is a free resource that you can use to see what might be in your water. And then it's also really cool. The website will also show what the best kind of filter system is to deal with that particular contaminant. So it will say, ionic might not work or charcoal might not work. You need distilled or whatever it is so that you can tell. Because a lot of times people are using a different filter that isn't actually helpful for the type of heavy metals or contaminants that are in their water. So, and I want to point out that water filters like Pure and Brita and your refrigerator filter, they may be getting some of the chlorine out, which is great, but they're not usually getting these heavy metals. So it does take a more heavy duty and expensive filter to make sure that you're getting those heavy metals out. But this is super important. I mean, think about it. We drink water every day, all day long. We need it to survive. And so if you're constantly getting all these contaminants and heavy metals from water, you're not going to be healthy. So this is so important to invest in this. Now, the filters that I recommend, there's one called Pure Effects, and so it is shown to filter out a lot of these different heavy metals. And it's a more under the counter one. So you connect it under the sink to your kitchen sink, for example. And so then you have a separate faucet that the filtered water comes out of. You can buy an entire home unit. So it's going to get the water at the source, which is ideal if you can do that, because then your bathing water and everything else is also going to be free of contaminants. For drinking water, there's also a filter called the Berkey, and this is a tabletop filter where you dump the water in and then it filters it and puts it in a tank underneath, and so then you can drink the clean water. I do also recommend cooking with filtered water as well, because things that you're cooking are going to absorb those heavy metals and contaminants too. And if you don't want to get a full system for your home, I actually don't have that. I have an under the sink filter that I use for cooking and drinking water. But in my shower, I have a little ball with a charcoal filter in it that filters out the chlorine. So there is that option as well. All right. So that is what I have to say about water. I just encourage you, if you aren't sleeping, to look at this piece of the puzzle. There are definitely many pieces of the puzzle, many reasons why people have insomnia, but I would say at least half of my clients have heavy metals showing up on the hair tissue mineral analysis test. So it's definitely something to address, because then, and and I should add that your body's also going to hold on to those heavy metals if you're deficient in certain minerals. So this is why mineral imbalance is such an important piece of the puzzle too, because heavy metals can do about 20% of the job of minerals, but they're toxic. But if you're deficient in sodium and potassium, for example, which is really common because those get depleted easily by stress, then your body will hold on to certain heavy metals so that they can do some of the job of sodium and potassium. So I'd never recommend any kind of chelation therapy or forcing your body to get rid of heavy metals. Instead, I always focus on balancing the most important minerals first, and then we can support your body as it's ready and strong enough to get rid of those heavy metals. All right. So I want to add one thing as well. I have been reading this book called An Elegant Defense by Matt Richtel. He is a journalist who wrote this book all about our immune system. So it's really fascinating. But I love it that he has a whole short chapter about sleep and the importance of sleep for our immune system. And he quotes a man named Dr. Irwin, who is an expert in the connection between our immune system and brain and behavior, including stress and sleep. And so Dr. Irwin says that there's a good case to be made for a link between sleeplessness and autoimmunity. So in this book, the author writes about a couple of people who have autoimmune diseases, and he's kind of getting into the complexity of autoimmunity. And so, we know that there is this indirect connection that lack of sleep causes stress. And then that stress causes lack of sleep. It becomes this vicious cycle. And lack of sleep, it definitely affects the immune system. It's shown even one night of poor sleep has a significant effect on the immune system. And it's funny, he quotes another doctor, Dr. Lemon, who is a physician in Denver who treated a woman with autoimmunity. And she's telling patients who are worried about their immune system, don't actually keep your house spotlessly clean. That is not the thing to focus on. Our immune system actually gets stronger when we're exposed to things. So she says, you should sleep until you're not tired anymore. Sleep is the easiest medicine to regulate. A single night alters your immune system. It blows things out of whack in one night. So that is the importance of sleep. And that is the importance of getting to the bottom of your sleep issues if this is something that you're having a problem with, which is super common. It's estimated 25% of the American population deals with insomnia on a regular basis. So I'm sure you know how miserable it is to live with insomnia, but it's also affecting your health too. And I want you to know that it's fixable, right? Like we can find out what's causing it and get to the bottom of it and address those things so that you can sleep normally. All right. Now I want to answer a listener question. So Luciana from my Facebook group asks, how can she switch off and go to sleep? And so I'm assuming she means switch her mind off. This is a common question that I get. And I've talked about this in a previous episode as well. It's called How to Calm Your Racing Mind. And I will link to that in the show notes. But my whole, what I have learned is that it's impossible to switch off your mind if there are hormones in your body like cortisol that are high at night when they shouldn't be. And what cortisol is going to do is it's going to cause your mind to race because if you're being chased by a bear in the woods, your body sends a lot of its resources to your brain so that you can think quickly and survive that bear chasing you. So it literally makes our mind race. If you're not being chased by a bear, it's going to make your mind race about whatever it is that's on your mind. So that's why a lot of times we think that the stressful things in our life are affecting our sleep, and they very well can be, but it's also can be, these imbalances in the body that cause cortisol to be high at night that are also causing your mind to race. So I see it as such a mental and a physiological issue. So really, the way to switch off your mind is to, yes, deal with the mental stress in your life, but it's also to find out why your body's releasing cortisol at night, if that's the issue. And I've talked about this many times. Usually it's from, an unhealthy gut, especially a pathogen in the gut. It can be from blood sugar imbalances. It can be that your liver isn't detoxing properly. So there are quite a few reasons why your cortisol levels might be high at night, but that's usually what I'm seeing in people who are having a hard time going to sleep or they're waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep. It's because your body is releasing hormones that are literally keeping you awake. Awesome, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Next time, I am going to talk about the 3 critical things to address to finally improve your sleep. So it's the 3 categories I'm looking at with all of my clients and what I'm looking at for each one of those. So if you've tried what seems like everything, I encourage you to tune in next week to find out what these 3 things are. And if you haven't taken my quiz, I have a quiz on my website, thecompletesleepsolution.com, that shows whether it's your body or it's your mind that's causing your insomnia. And for almost everyone, it's some combination of both, but you can find out what that is by taking the quiz. Feel free to email me with your questions, Martha at thecompletesleepsolution.com, and I will talk to you next week.